This video is brought to you by BetUS. DeMeco, think fast. The Texans finished up 3 days of training camp practices outside of Cleveland at the University School, Nick Caserio's old alma mater. I know it's all weird, but it has to do with wanting to make the Hall of Fame ceremony between their games in Chicago and Pittsburgh, something that I'm getting freakishly excited about for a preseason game. This is the most excited I've been for a preseason game since I think maybe my rookie year, when I was more nervous and vomiting than I was excited. Probably the most excited I've been for a preseason game, because the Steelers are going to play hard and competitively, just the same way DeMeco Ryans is going to play hard and competitively. The Texans have a boatload of starters playing in this game. The Steelers have a boatload of starters playing in this game, so I'm very, very excited about it. DeMeco took the podium and first off just talked about what the experience in Cleveland has been like.
I think we've had 4 really good days of work. Was telling some guys, I felt like we finally had real camp practice, just how efficient we were offensively, defensively being where we're supposed to be. It felt like real camp practices. So I was happy to get the work in. I think we accomplished a lot by being here.
I think there is something to actually being at a training camp. I noticed this even as training camp started to evolve. Gary Kubiak came in, and that was in my 10th year in the NFL. And when we were allowed to go stay at home at night instead of staying at the hotel, and I'd never had, and that was kind of weird. I think you miss out on some of that extra time, that time between your last meeting and bed when you might talk to guys or coaches that you wouldn't normally talk to. So I think there's really something to going off somewhere, whether it's staying at college dorms or just anything. I felt like the whole West Virginia experience was a little too glitzy. It was a little too exotic. It was a little too NBA, like going off to some exotic location. I know West Virginia doesn't sound exotic, but that resort they stay at, it's pretty damn nice. So DeMeco, he said it a couple times this week that it just felt like this was a real training camp. The guys are isolated. They're all getting to know each other. The way I've gotten to know BetUS, where you get extremely fast payouts. And if you know the Texans, the way I've learned these Texans, I think the defense, who are going to play most of their starters, is going to do really well versus this brand new Steelers offense with a brand new offensive coordinator and with Justin Fields as their quarterback, who reportedly has improved. But outside of George Pickens, I don't feel great about their wide receivers. I think the Texans defense is going to have a great performance in the first half, and I'm going to rely on the burgeoning depth of the Texans defense for the rest of the game to clean up after all the backups. Right now, BetUS is giving 125% bonuses on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. You can use my link below. Next question was about Jake Hansen, the linebacker who's now in his 3rd year with the Texans, and he flies around all over the place. DeMeco really seems to love him. They can't shake him.
Jake, he's done a great job. We put a lot on him, asked him to play all 3 linebacker spots. And Jake is the one guy who can handle it and not blink.
Yeah, and the one thing about Jake Hansen, aside from just kind of being like a flea you can't get rid of in a good way, though, like a flea you're happy about having, like a friendly little cartoon flea. Playing all 3 of those spots, it's very big when you have linebacker injuries, something that DeMeco really values. That linebacker position right now, I thought was hyper competitive. I think that I don't know if they look at Henry To'oTo'o as a Sam linebacker and the guy they want there right now. They've been swapping and rotating guys in quite a bit. Henry To'oTo'o has gotten a lot of reps with the ones when they're out there in their base defense. But I think you've got multiple different skill sets. John Harris, I think, just keeps bringing up Neville Hewitt as a guy that just big, strong, and can play the run. And I think whichever guy ends up not making the cut there, other than Henry To'oTo'o, who didn't play the other night. This is what surprised me was I kind of looked at it that when Henry To'oTo'o didn't play, I thought maybe it was a bad sign for Henry To'oTo'o and that maybe he would have gone in the 4th quarter if the game hadn't been canceled. John Harris thinks that he didn't play because they look at him as the starter. So something to watch. I'm excited to watch him in a game situation. Linebackers are maybe one of the position groups I have the hardest time watching from ground level and trying to figure out, exactly, all right, well, what was he seeing here? What was he reading? Why didn't he fill there? It's really hard to do from ground level without being able to see the picture in front of him. This is DeMeco on monitoring reps.
I'm monitoring reps every day. I'm monitoring reps, seeing where we are, keeping a track of it, just making sure we're smart with how we're loading our guys with the reps and making sure we're peaking at the right time. Because when you start camp as early as we have with the Hall of Fame game, I don't want guys to come in and we're peaking right at preseason week 2.
You don't want to peak too early. This is something that just you might think like, hey, it gets better with age. No, you still get excited and you peak too early. In a football context, I was really happy to hear DeMeco say that. I honestly wasn't expecting it because we talk so much about load management and all these other things these days. And DeMeco's cool with all the load management, but that's an old school football thing and something that they've talked about for a long time. So I think this is another area where, yeah, the science supports it, but this is also maybe DeMeco, the old school football player and coach, bringing some of that old school knowledge in with it. That there's something about camp because of the length of it, and NFL camp is so long that you run the risk of things getting stale. And especially if they're not playing that many reps in preseason games, but guys are competitive, you want to be careful that it stays fresh. And aside from getting fatigued, that you still want them to be vicious killers, you know. In the military, I've read generals talk about this, that you have to find a balance when you're training for a mission, and that if you start to train over and over and over again for the same mission, guys just start to lose their mental edge. So I think that you've got the analytics and you've got the GPS tracking and all that, but for a guy like DeMeco, I wonder if some of it is just kind of, how's it feel at practice? Are guys enthusiastic? Are guys just like, champing at the bit to just go out there and do something? He probably always wants to just keep that kind of that energy level that's bubbling just below the surface. I'm cool with it. I always two a days every day for 7 days a week was dumb. It was dumb from the get-go. It was dumb when the Junction Boys did it. It was dumb when we did it in high school. It's the only sport where forever the philosophy was, let's beat the crap out of them as hard as we can, right up until they play the games that actually matter. It was dumb. So I'm not going to be a grumpy old man about it. Titus Howard. DeMeco, are there any updates about Titus Howard, who walked off the field, went to the medical tent, did eventually leave the practice field on a cart, but it wasn't like a medical cart ambulance type situation? A lot of dicey reporting and misinterpretation on those. And I remember we succumbed to it. I read that right before I got on this damn live stream, and I read the tweet that said he got carted off the field. How's Titus Howard doing?
The update on Titus Howard. Titus is good.
There you go. Titus is good. Last one from the press conference yesterday, off of something that Bobby Slowick had said about putting players in stressful situations in games, not always making it easy for them to win, maybe sometimes making it impossible to win. DeMeco went on to explain that strategy a little bit.
As coaches, as you prepare for practice, you want to try to put your players through as many stressful situations as possible. So when it comes to scripting plays, you don't always script for success and make it easy on players, because when they get in the game and the picture changes or it's difficult, like, how do they respond? Like, we want to see our guys respond and go through the difficult as hard as we can make it here in practice. So whether it's offense, right, scripting for get it to your third read in the progression, whether it's a run play that you're outnumbered on, still running that play. And a lot of things we do is also to teach, right? And you have to get it on film to teach guys of why you do certain things and why you don't do certain things. Also defensively, like, we may put guys in situations where it's not a favorable position. It's not a favorable, all right, down and distance, not a favorable situation. How do you respond?
Yeah, and this is one of the things I appreciate about DeMeco. I've been on teams before where every play was scripted. The players, like the offensive line, this is just so maddening. They would go over exactly which blitzes they were going to see in specific periods, and like some of it was because the offensive line coach was paranoid about guys screwing up, and then the head coach freaking out. And if honestly, Tom Coughlin was a head coach that was just going to take you to task for every little failure. This was early in his career, and sometimes you can get into you can get into a mindset and a culture where people are just so terrified of making mistakes that you don't actually get that much out of practice because you're not trying anything new. You're not challenging people in practice. And when you're a defensive lineman on a team where the offensive line is horrible and they're sitting there in practice spoon feeding these guys on how to pick up a blitz without having to do it in real time, it's maddening because they get out in the game and they can't think on their feet. It's just like, that's the idiotic stuff that happens. So I get excited whenever I see DeMeco do stuff that makes sense. It also reminds me, if you want a Houston-based analogy to this, early in the space program, they realized the value of simulation, and they tried to make it as hard as possible because they didn't know what the hell was going to happen when they strapped a human being into a tin can and vaulted him off the earth. My God! So they tried to foresee all of the worst elements and how it might go and everything, and you drill and drill and drill and drill. And when the astronauts first got up in space, they would remark, like, this is just actually a lot smoother than what we trained for, other than obviously in some of the incidents when things all went haywire. They were prepared for those because they'd gone through it a million times. And, as a trained FAA licensed pilot a long time ago, I got like 70 hours in a Cessna 172. I know that's one thing instructors would talk about a lot, is just that, a lot of people log a lot of miles as a pilot when they're just flying the same miles over and over again. They're not really being taxed. You go into the military and it's amazing. Like, they pack a whole lot of training into a compressed amount of time because they are working their butts off in simulators and everything, just getting like literally flipped upside down into situations and have to figure their way out of it. So you can spend 1 hour in a simulator or 1 hour at practice and accomplish 10 times more than if you're just cruising along and your stupid offensive line coach is feeding the offensive linemen, who are stupid to begin with, how to pick up a blitz without actually having to think about it. So if you don't want to be let down by your gambling site the way you've been let down by various offensive lines in the past, go to BetUS. Thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this video.